On the evening of the most important dinner of her life, Clara Bennett was supposed to arrive at the prestigious Hawthorne estate wearing a designer coat, carrying a rare bottle of wine, and proving to the family of her fiancé, Julian Ashford, that she belonged among them. But everything changed when a sudden snowstorm forced her to take a different route through the old river district of Bellwether. As Clara hurried past a closed train station, she noticed an elderly man sitting beneath the broken awning of an abandoned bookstore, his hands trembling from the cold and his shoes soaked through. And although Julian had warned her that his family valued punctuality above almost everything else, she stopped because something about the man's exhausted expression reminded her of her late grandfather. Instead of simply handing him a few coins and continuing toward the estate, Clara bought 2 hot meals from a nearby cafe, sat beside the stranger on the icy pavement, and listened as he quietly explained that he had spent the afternoon searching for someone who had once promised to help him, but never returned. When Clara realized the man's coat was little more than a collection of worn fabric held together by thread, she removed the elegant emerald green coat Julian had insisted she wear for the gala and placed it around the stranger's shoulders, telling him, "You need this tonight more than I do," before giving him her gloves and asking a passing driver to take him to a warm shelter. By the time Clara reached Hawthorne Estate, nearly 40 minutes had passed. Her carefully styled hair was damp from the snow, and she was wearing nothing more than a thin black dress beneath a borrowed wool sweater she had found in the cafe, while Julian stood beneath the enormous entrance chandelier, looking as though he had been waiting for a verdict. "Do you understand what you have done?" He whispered angrily, explaining that his mother had already been telling relatives that Clara was unsuitable, and that his grandfather, Edmund Ashford, was famous for remembering every mistake people made. But Clara looked at him calmly and replied, "If your family decides my worth based on a coat and a clock, then perhaps I was never the person they wanted to meet." Julian's expression softened for a moment, but before he could answer, the enormous wooden doors opened, and a stern-looking woman named Vivian Ashford swept into the foyer, demanding to know why her son had arrived without his fiancé dressed according to the instructions she had personally given them. Clara expected humiliation, yet Vivian unexpectedly stopped when she saw the empty place where Clara's emerald coat should have been, because that particular coat had belonged to Edmund's wife and had been preserved for years as one of the family's most sentimental possessions. And Clara suddenly realized Julian had never told her that the garment carried a history far deeper than fashion. The dinner began beneath crystal chandeliers in a room filled with portraits, antique silver, and people who spoke in carefully measured voices. But the chair at the head of the table remained empty because Edmund Ashford, the legendary founder of the family's international shipping empire, had not appeared in public for nearly 11 years after a bitter dispute had torn his family apart. Clara tried to remain composed as Vivian questioned her about her modest upbringing and nonprofit work. Yet just as the questions became increasingly uncomfortable, the doors at the opposite end of the room opened and an elderly man entered slowly, wearing the emerald coat Clara had given away and carrying the same battered leather bag she had seen beside him on the pavement. Julian immediately stood, his face draining of color as he whispered, "Grandfather," while Vivian pushed back her chair so violently that it struck the wall, because the supposedly secluded billionaire had spent the entire evening disguised as a homeless traveler to observe how his family treated someone they believed had no influence over them. Edmund walked directly toward Clara, placed one hand on the back of her chair, and said, "You gave away something valuable tonight without knowing whether anyone important would ever thank you," before turning toward the rest of the table and adding, "That is precisely why I asked you all to be here." Room fell silent as Edmund revealed that he had intentionally arrived in Bellwether several hours earlier wearing old clothes, because he wanted to discover what his family had become when they believed nobody with money or power was watching them. And he explained that Clara was not the only person he had observed, because Vivian had passed him earlier without stopping. Julian had nearly driven past him while talking on the phone. And several senior family executives had refused even to make eye contact. For years, I have watched people perform kindness when cameras were present, Edmund said, looking directly at Clara. But tonight I finally saw someone do it when there was absolutely nothing to gain. Julian was visibly shaken when Edmund admitted that the real purpose of the dinner had never been to judge Clara's manners, clothing, education, or family background, but to determine whether Julian had learned the lesson Edmund believed his son had failed to teach him years earlier. That wealth could purchase comfort, but could never manufacture character. Edmund then revealed that he had temporarily removed Julian from responsibility for one of the family's most important charitable foundations, after discovering that Julian had rejected several applicants simply because their backgrounds did not fit the image the board wanted. And Julian lowered his head as Clara quietly said, "If he wants another chance, give him one, but make sure he understands that people are not projects to be managed." Of ending the evening in another family argument, Edmund asked Clara to walk with him through the estate's winter garden, where he told her about the woman who had once owned the emerald coat and how she had spent her final years helping families who had lost everything during a devastating flood. He returned the coat to Clara and said, "You reminded me why she wore it." And when Clara finally returned to the dining room, Julian approached her without excuses, admitting that he had spent months trying to make her appear wealthier, quieter, and more acceptable because he was terrified she would expose how insecure he felt inside his own family. 6 months later, Clara and Julian held their wedding in a small community garden beside the same river district where she had met Edmund, choosing simple wooden chairs, homemade food, and flowers grown by local volunteers instead of the extravagant ceremony Vivian had originally demanded. Edmund attended without bodyguards or photographers, wearing the emerald coat over his shoulders despite the warm weather, and when someone jokingly asked why a billionaire would treasure an old coat so much, he smiled and answered, "Because sometimes the most expensive things in life are worthless, while the simplest act of kindness can change an entire family." Eventually became the director of Edmund's charitable foundation, while Julian rebuilt his relationship with his family by learning to listen before judging and serve before demanding respect. And the old abandoned bookstore near the station was transformed into a community center offering warm meals, job training, and temporary shelter to people who had nowhere else to go. Clara often returned there during winter evenings, remembering the night she had believed she was sacrificing her future by giving away a coat, only to discover that she had actually been choosing the values that would shape her future. And she learned that the greatest test of character is rarely the one announced in advance, but the quiet decision we make when nobody seems important enough to impress. Please subscribe to our channel and share this video with your friends and family. We create entertaining and inspiring stories for our viewers, and your support helps us continue making great content for you.